Hey everyone, JD Mills here, and this is a reading vlog. This is the first reading vlog, so I'm still getting my feet wet. I also think it's kind of hilarious that in every video I feel like my dress becomes less and less professional and more like I'm practically just wearing pajamas right now. The hat is the only illusion that I've been out and about today. It's the first thing in the morning, hence the terrible lighting. I am relying entirely on the sunlight right now, so hopefully that looks okay. So, it has been a big couple of weeks for reading for me. I really slowed down at the beginning of the year because I was cramming as much as I could in December trying to fill my Goodreads quota. I know like how people feel about that. I like to be held accountable. It helps me continue reading and it makes me feel good about myself because I was above my goal last year. I think I did 25 or 24 or 25 books last year, which is probably the most I've ever read in a year. So that made me feel good about myself. Am I going to get to 30 this year? Probably not, but we'll see. Maybe I'll surprise myself. But speaking of surprising myself, I actually finished a couple of books. I get to talk about that. Um, I started Red Country last year. Um, this is one of the last of the standalone Joe Abercrombie first law novels. Probably my least favorite out of the three. That doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I very much enjoyed it. It's just the beginning, honestly, it kind of just drags on a bit, and then the end just really ramps up, and I was hooked the whole time there. We also get the return of some of my favorite characters in it. I'm not going to. The return and the introduction of some of the new characters were pretty great, too. It's interesting, the way Abercrombie describes the standalones, like I remember in an interview he had said, oh, you don't have to read them, but I highly recommend that you do. I really disagree. I don't think that they're standalones with different ideas and different stories, but they have a lot of returning characters throughout them. They have a lot of characters from the First Law trilogy. I mean, everything in the First Law, it really just kind of loops into itself. Joe Abercrombie is really only going to be using new characters when he has to. He tends to try to reuse them as much as he can. And so I highly recommend the standalones. They kind of feel like a very disconnected, disjointed trilogy on their own, rather than like each one being a separate thing, because they all kind of follow. They're all in a linear order chronologically. They're not necessarily right next to each other, but they're always going forward in time. So you're never jumping around. And then I also finished, speaking of jumping around in time, we also finished Sharp Ends, which is a short story anthology. It's a pretty quick read. It was brilliant. I feel like, again, this was more, this felt more like a novel, like a very quick pulpy novel, because we follow Shavidia a lot. And I don't remember, I know Chev, she shows up in other books. And I don't really remember what her significance is. But like every other story is a story about Chev, and then there's other stories that like return other characters, and right at the very end of Sharp Ends, the last story, I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's a story involving our main man, Logan Ninefingers. And holy crap, I have to say, I had plans for my next literary analysis video. Those are getting pushed back. I'm doing a video on Logan. I have to do a video on Logan now after reading this. Um, Pretty fantastic. I just recommend, like, if you're reading Joe Abercrombie, if you read the First Law trilogy, before you move on to the Age of Madness, read the standalones, read the short stories. You're not gonna complain. I mean, they're amazing. The context that they add to everything around is just really amazing. I love it, and especially coming from a background like my first like big series that I got really into when I got back into reading. Well, I started with A Song of Ice and Fire, and then from there I moved on to Malazan after I finished that. And Malazan, I mean, was real jarring for the first time I read it, going from book one and then book two only has like half of the main cast from book one in it. And I'm like, where are the rest of my people? I was just waiting. So I'm kind of used to going to different characters and not, necessarily following the same main cast. And I know that might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I think that if you're going to read Joe, you got to read all of it. I mean, he does a lot of great world building, a lot of great, well, really character work, but it's the context. It adds context, and there are things that are going to show up in the short stories and in the standalones that are already going to be appearing in the Age of Madness, because that's the next thing I started. Age of Madness, A Little Hatred. I gave this a start. I think I'm probably, where am I at? I do a lot of audiobooks, so my physical books don't get used all that much. So I don't even have yeah, I'm not even 100 pages in. Um but wow, the writing is really good. It caught me right off the bat. Normally with a new cast of characters, I am involuntarily skeptical about them. I don't really know why. It's just it was hard for me for a long time. But like I said, it might have been Malazan that tempered my ability to switch. Like I've kind of lost expectation of being close to certain perspective characters for a long time, and just understanding when their time is done. And now, the Age of Madness follows the children of some very key main characters. It is really interesting, just right off the bat, and like it's nice too because I read everything leading up to it. I'm clued in, so there's all these sort of like callbacks, other characters showing up, situations that I know about because I read everything. So if you're going into the Age of Madness, if you just finished the First Law trilogy, you read the standalones, you read the short stories, and then read this. It pays off. And so I'll let you know how this turns out. I've heard good things about the Age of Madness. I've heard it's even better than the First Law trilogy, which the First Law trilogy last year was the fastest I've ever gotten through a series. I think I finished it in a month, which is insane for me. And I'm already, I already have a good start on this. And I got a couple long drives coming up. I'm gonna be listening to those audiobooks. Stephen Pacey is an amazing narrator. And I also like cracking open the books and reading it old school too. I actively enjoy doing that, but I have more practical use out of audiobooks because I have more time where I am doing something, but I could be filling my ears with stories and knowledge. So, you know, if you think that audiobooks isn't real reading, I will heartily disagree. Uh, I'm just not going to get into that discussion here. If you don't want to listen to me talk because I use audiobooks, that's your problem. Go away. I don't need you here. So that's it for Joe Abercrombie. Those are the finished two books very quickly. On to the Age of Madness. I'm excited. And now, I guess I'll talk about, before I get onto my other like block of information. This is what I've been kind of reading. Lightning by Dean Koontz. Hey, just a quick content warning. Lightning by Dean Koontz has a lot of discussions of sexual assault, especially against children. I discuss my issues with that. I discuss my discomfort with that. But if you want to skip ahead to the next book I talk about, there are timestamps, so go ahead and feel free. I've never read Dean Koontz. I've enjoyed the movie Odd Thomas, and I have been wanting to read Odd Thomas, the book. I know there's like a whole series. I started Lightning because it was recommended to me on TikTok. I made a little tiny review about 11/22/63 by Stephen King, which is one of my favorite books now. I feel like every time I read a Stephen King book, it becomes one of my favorites. I used to hate Stephen King. I used to hate him with like a passion. I don't even remember really why. He's kind of an asshole, kind of pretentious. But I also feel like that gets misread a lot. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's very. This is a total tangent. I feel like Stephen King is very much set in his ways. He has things that he has ways that he thinks that things should be done. So, I mean, a man as successful as him, you can't really argue, right? I mean, if he says a certain way is the way to do it, I mean, he's more than well within his rights and reasoning to believe that. That doesn't mean you have to do it. I mean, I think the tweet that pissed me off a long time ago was that he insisted that pen on paper editing was the only way to really edit a novel. Editing software is, I mean, if that's what works for him, good for you, Stephen King, but I'm going to stick to my word processors. Much easier that way for me. But anyway, Lightning was recommended to me in the comments of a TikTok video I made. For context, I was making TikToks for a while. They were doing pretty good, and then I moved out to the middle of nowhere, and my internet comes out of a phone line, and my phone will not upload a TikTok. It just won't do it. So I don't make TikToks anymore, but I can make, somehow 30-minute YouTube videos are fine coming from the computer. But Lightning, I'm intrigued it has a very interesting setup where it's like definitely like a time travel thing going on. There is a motif with storms and lightning already. I mean, I'm 65 pages in. I haven't spent a lot of time with it. I'm kind of hesitant with the book though, even though it's interesting with the time travel aspects, and there's definitely like a mystery. There are things going on, um, like some sort of strange conspiracy. There is one big thing that's really making me. I might not finish it. I might not continue it. But there's a lot of discussion of violence against children, which I'm not cool with. Like it's very self-aware, where like these perpetrators are being punished. They're being killed and stuff, but I don't like reading any book that has heavy sexual assault in it. Um, I mean, I think A Song of Ice and Fire is really where I draw the line. It's like that is like as much as I can go without putting the book down. Just you know, not something I enjoy reading about, and that for it to be so focused on children, it makes this book a little bit disturbing to me in all the wrong ways. So I'm gonna continue giving it a chance. And if it gets too bad, I'm putting it down, and I'm not going to apologize. I paid $3 for it at half price books, and I'm sure there's something to it, but I don't have to engage with content that I don't want to engage with. So if it upsets me, I'm just gonna put it down. I've read a lot of books, a little bit, in the last couple weeks because I'm also today. This is finals week for my first term of the year. I do like accelerated classes, so I do 2 classes over the course of 2 months, and I'm working on a term paper for my philosophy class. Which holy crap, is philosophy just such garbage? It's just so um it's just so much talking about nothing. I know that it kind of misses the point, and I'm really trying to think critically about these things, but I just can't believe that they're. I don't know. I'm just a very logical person. I like solid answers, and thinking about explanations to things and never. Because the whole thing with philosophy is it's never concrete, it's never correct. So it feels very useless to me in practicality, but they also say there was a quote that said like leisure is the is the precursor to philosophy. So, we have nothing else better to do but to ponder questions that don't necessarily need to be answered, um, which is a scholarly pursuit. And so I'm writing a paper on the existence of evil. And so I started reading a book called. I don't have the book because it's like a textbook and it costs almost $100 to get in paper. So I just got digital versions from my school's library. This is the best I can show you about it here. But it's called On Good and Evil and the Gray Zone by Alex Danchev. And I'm not really sure what the point of it is. I've been reading it, and the significant thing about it is that he talks a lot about Vasily Grossman and his novel Life and Fate. The whole first chapter is talking about a character that shows up early in that novel, Ikonikov, who is kind of like a moral observer.
Hello again. Another content warning. Life and Fate is a historical novel set during the Holocaust and from the perspective of pro Stalin Russia. It does discuss what life was like in Nazi concentration camps. So if you're not interested in that, timestamps below, feel free to skip ahead.
And almost kind of shows the morality of the novel as a whole. Like Life and Fate is a novel, but it is written more as like a testament to the people who died during the Holocaust. It's very much like every encounter within the book is a little microcosm of things that actually happened. Vasily Grossman was a Jew during the Holocaust. I mean, he's also a Soviet conformist during the 30s and 40s. I don't. It's not entirely clear. I read it a few times, but I read it all very fast, so I'm not sure if he actually went through concentration camps or he was a part of the Russian military. I think either is likely, but what did happen is that Life and Fate is kind of described as like a Soviet epic. And this book was considered so dangerous by the KGB in the post-Stalin era that they arrested it. They raided his home and they took his manuscripts of it and they said, "You can't publish this for 200 to 300 years because this is so dangerous it'll hurt the public." And I just found it kind of funny that knowing that not even 100 years later, I am getting a translated English copy at a random library in Indiana. So, you know, good. You can't silence people. I guess is a thing. I'm gonna make a video. That's the thing. I'm also gonna make a video about that because I started writing a script while I was in the library reading this, and it really did kind of sit with me that this book, this text, was forbidden, was to be imprisoned for 200 to 300 years, as if this book murdered 3 people. Um, and I get to read it with no issues now. It really got me thinking about like our access to information, and made me start thinking about how like libraries are kind of under attack. That's another thing I want to talk about. Libraries, dude. They rock. Did you know libraries rock? Have you been to a library recently? Go to a library, especially one like downtown in like the city near you, and just like check out all the things that they have there. They have so much cool stuff. And the reason why libraries are important. I mean, it might seem kind of stupid for a library to be renting out video games to people for free. But the whole point of a library is free. We as people have a right to the information that is out there, to the arts and to, things that exist. And so libraries are very important, especially for people who can't afford to acquire these things by purchasing them. We still have a right to experience art and have a right to access information. And so libraries support that. And there's a lot of cool things you can do. I mean, I just downloaded this thing called Hoopla. I haven't been to a library in years. And I go to the one downtown and I get my library card. They tell me about all these things. So I downloaded this thing called Hoopla, and I can borrow audiobooks. Like, you know how much money I've spent on Audible that I can't really justify spending? So if I can rent something for free from my library and listen to it on Hoopla, that's going to help me tremendously. So I recommend you check out your library, see what kind of resources they have, and take advantage of them because they're there for you to use. You're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting the authors. There was I'll put a link to it, but there was this document that was signed by a bunch of different like Neil Gaiman, I think Octavia Butler, I might be misremembering that, but a lot of very prominent authors that signed this document basically defending libraries. They're just fine. They're not upset. You're not denying anybody royalties. The libraries pay for the rights to use what they use. So you use it. You should use it. Libraries are great. Anyway, Life and Fate. I'm kind of I'm definitely quoting it from my paper. There's a lot of like, yeah, so it starts out following an old Russian man, a pro pro-Stalinist, Mikhail Sidorovich Mostovskoy. Starts off with him, and I think it changes perspectives down the line. It's like definitely multiple stories all kind of combining into one epic. And it talks about just kind of like his experience and the people that he knew in a Nazi concentration camp. And it goes, Ikonikov especially, who like was a priest, is no longer a priest, and he laments that he's not. Well, I say lament, but he's very cheerful, which is also very interesting. But Ikonikov, the main moral lesson that he puts out is that he ponders at the fact like I am a bad person because I am going out into the bogs and I am filling, I am building concrete structures where people are being gassed. And then somebody else tells him, another priest tells him, like, you are innocent, you're a slave, God will understand. And he says, well, at any moment, at the cost of my life, I could refuse. So I am not innocent. And that is a point to be made. Yeah, at any point, these people being forced to do bad things could refuse if they were willing to give up their life for it. Is that a fair thing to say? I don't know. It's not up to me. Um, it is thought provoking though. I'll say that this is a very heavy book. It's very thought provoking. I'm gonna try to read all of it. It's pretty beefy, and it's a slow read for me because it's very historical. There are footnotes everywhere. There are names being thrown around that I've never heard before, people and figures and things that I don't know the significance of. But I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm obviously using it for research purposes, but I'm also just gonna read it for my own enjoyment. And I'm not done talking about books about philosophy and Russians during World War II. Um, I don't have physical copies of them. I've also been reading this book called uh, "Explaining Evil: Four Views," which is pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. It's a scholarly journal about written by the introduction is written by what's his name, Paul Franks, and he compiled four essays written by four different philosophers. Two of them are theists, the other two are atheists. They just talk about why they think evil exists. There is a thing in the philosophy community called the problem of evil, which I mean, if you're more learned than I am, this is probably not new to you. But it's a very interesting topic that people discuss and debate and figure out why evil exists and does that conflict with God existing and things like that. So I'm reading that for different perspectives to pull for my paper. My paper's like halfway done. I got plenty of time. It's Thursday. It's due on Sunday. I haven't touched my marketing homework, but I don't really give a shit about marketing, so I want my paper to be pretty good. So, or at least, I want to put a good effort into it. I don't think I'm not a philosopher. I barely see the point of philosophy, but I am putting my effort in. I want to try to really think about this topic of why evil exists. And then there's a couple other texts. One of them is called the Gulag Archipelago. I haven't dove into it yet. I couldn't find a copy. If somebody else has checked it out, who could possibly be researching this obscure topic that I have happened upon? I don't know. There is an audiobook of it, so I got some drives next week for work. I might be listening to the audiobook. It also might not matter though next week because I mean my paper will be turned in, and so I guess if I am listening to the audiobook next week, it's just for my own fascination rather than for learning anything. And there's another philosophy book. There's a lot of philosophy books. Let me just pull up Adobe Digital Editions. The Roots of Evil by John Keeks or Kekes, whichever one. It's just another book on the problem of evil. I might read some of it. Um, that's the thing with studying is you have all these books, and I don't think anybody reads any of these covers to cover. I wish I could. I really intended to just like sit down this week and read these books that I've picked out for my research paper cover to cover. It didn't happen that way, but I've read enough of it to where I understand. I'm able to pull stuff out of the text and relate them to my actual thesis statement in the paper. So maybe that's more the point. I don't know. Being a student is hard, and I'm just doing my best at it. And lastly, the last thing I'm going to talk about is that since my term paper is due this week, and that means I can stop reading all this random stuff for studying for the time being, I want to reread Malazan Book of the Fallen. Malazan Book of the Fallen? It's Malazan. That's the proper way. I am just so used to saying Malazan. I'm confusing myself now. So I'm going to start on Gardens of the Moon. A Critical Dragon. Very great YouTuber. Of kind of like an inspiration to what I'm doing here now. He does like literary analysis, talks about film, media, and books. I think that's what he says at the beginning. But he just started a series where he's talking about rereading Malazan and what to take into it. He did a video on the series as a whole, talking about kind of like, I guess like the perspective you should be going into on a reread, and then he just released a video on Gardens of the Moon. There's also the 10 Very Big Books podcast I think I'll be listening to while I read. And I'm very specifically, I listened to most of Malazan on audiobook my first go around. And that helped me get through it. But now that I know what's going on, and I really enjoy reading Erickson. His writing speaks to me in a way that other authors don't. I'm gonna try to keep to my book, like do it completely paper the whole way around, and just take it a chapter at a time, take notes as I go, and talk about it in the reading vlogs. Malazan won't be all that I talk about in the reading vlogs. I'm always reading more than one thing because I like to dive into multiple things. But when I get really excited about something, I basically only read that thing until it's done. So we'll see. We're going to be doing a Malazan reread, and we'll talk about it here on the channel. And yeah, that's my reading for the last couple of weeks. It's a very rambly video. I kind of just ramble when I talk about things I get excited about, and I get excited about the things that I'm reading. Later tonight, I'm going to record a book review. Later tonight, we're going to record a book review on Revelator by Douglas Gregory. This was the last book that I read in 2022. It had me captivated the whole time, so I'm excited to talk about it. I'll wait until the sun goes down and it's dark, so we have better lighting in here, and I'll be dressed different because I will have, gotten ready for the day, and have lived my day. But yeah, that's all for today, guys. I hope that you have a wonderful day. If this in any way has helped you out, or you disagree with me vehemently about anything that I have said, go ahead and let me know. And until then, I will see you next time in the next one.